Hello and welcome. You're watching Head to Head on UATV. I am Oles Garjuk. The court case of ex-president and fugitive Viktor Yanukovych remains at a standstill. The prosecutor's office has been unable to take the trial proceedings further due to the absence of Yanukovych's lawyer. Meanwhile, new evidence has been revealed confirming that Russia's aggression in Ukraine was inevitable and pre-planned. To have a detailed conversation on the issue, we are joined in the studio by former Russian Federation State Duma deputy Ilya Ponomaryov. He is moreover the key witness in the case of Viktor Yanukovych. Hello and thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
First of all, during the prosecutor's interrogation in December last year, you stated that Russia was preparing in advance to invade Ukraine. What kind of preparations were you talking about?
Probably preparing in advance is a little bit loud and bold statement. What I was talking about is that the Assembly of Federation Council, Russian Senate, was foreplanned, and that was planned before Russia actually received a letter from President Yanukovych soliciting using of Russian military force on the territory of Ukraine. That is important to understand, who was the first, whether it was President Putin who decided to invade and needed Yanukovych's letter to legitimize this invasion, or it was a genuine request by Mr. Yanukovych to introduce military force.
So what was decided in the Federation Council?
Federation Council gave agreement to Mr. Putin to use military force in Ukraine on March 1st, 2014, and later in United Nations, that time Russia's representative Vitaly Churkin showed the letter. It was on the 3rd or on the 4th of March, showing that it was not an act of aggression on behalf of Russian Federation, but it was a legitimate request by Ukrainian president.
He showed it during the session of the UN Security Council, right? And that was some kind of resolution, if I understand, some kind of document allowing Putin to use the militants abroad, right?
Yes, that's according to Russian constitution. Our president cannot use military force somewhere overseas, across Russian border, if not a resolution of the Senate.
Were you also there at the Federation Council?
No, that was Senate, and I was member of the House. Of the lower chamber of Russian parliament, but I had a lot of friends there, and my statement, my testimony during the investigation was that I knew people who saw the letter. I saw the official stenogram of that meeting of the Federation Council, and I heard a lot of statements from senators, from my friends in the parliament, that their decision was affected by Yanukovych's letter.
Have you heard about anyone being against the invasion of Ukraine during this Federal Council?
No, the vote was unanimous. The question is that people, could have been complaining in the shadows without putting it to the light.
But did they vote for it unanimously?
Yeah, they voted unanimously. And of course, Yanukovych's letter helped them, to morally justify this act of aggression. If not Yanukovych's letter, at least there could have been a more tough discussion whether it should have been done or not. With this letter, it was a legitimate act.
So that's the trick about Yanukovych's letter. That's the way to legitimize the invasion to Ukraine? That's
absolutely. That's why it was an act of treason on behalf of former president, and that is what all this court is all about.
Do you know whose idea actually it was for Yanukovych to appeal to Putin about the invasion to Ukraine?
Well, most likely Putin himself. I don't think that Mr. Yanukovych, would get this idea on his own. Probably that was a condition for his shelter in Russia to help legitimize military force, but it wasn't his own interest, because at that time Yanukovych could have had certain illusions that his power could have been restored, and with Russian military backing, that they can reconquer Kiev and put him back into power. That's also a possibility.
So basically, it was ordered by Kremlin.
I think so, and so it was a legitimation.
How do you think, if Yanukovych didn't flee Ukraine in 2014, what do you think would have been the destiny of the country?
I think it would be more or less the same. You know, Yanukovych could have been put to trial, you know, from the day one, and not as it's happening right now in absentia. It's a corrupt, crooked regime that was overthrown by Maidan revolution. But the question is not about Yanukovych. That's a story of the past, and its importance for Ukraine to recognize how that have happened, you know, and how that regime was installed to avoid similar mistakes in the future. But right now, for the country, I think that the biggest issue is about present-day economy, present-day problems, present-day primarily social issues, corruption issues, security issues, and it's all happening right now.
Well, we are trying to work on this problem, but
I wish you all the luck with this. Yes.
Nevertheless, it is very interesting. Even though the resolution allowing Putin to use Russian militants abroad was adopted, Putin didn't go farther than Crimea and Donbass. Why do you think he didn't go farther?
I think those issues, they are more or less separate. I think that taking over Crimea for Putin was a retaliation for what have happened on Maidan. A retaliation plus it was a media act at his home to show Russians that he is still power, that he is not making mistakes, and to overshadow what have happened in Ukraine, because it's appeared for majority of Russians, and both for common Russians and for Russian elites, that Putin is making mistakes, that he put his stakes on Mr. Yanukovych in 2004 and lost, and then he made the same mistake in 2014 and lost once again. So that means that he is making mistakes, he is not invulnerable, and that's an invitation for a revolution back home. So by taking over Crimea, he flipped the agenda, and now he was like commander-in-chief, you know, the person who is reconquering Russian land, you know, that kind of things. What have happened in Donbass, it was, I think, firstly, an initiative from certain Putin's friends and his surrounding, from his cronies, that wanted to increase their own career position in Putin's eyes. And then he recognized that by invading in eastern Ukraine, he could make a deal with the West. So let me pull out of eastern Ukraine, and you will recognize my annexation of Crimea instead. And that's where we are right now. This trade is continuing, these negotiations continue with all those Minsk agreements. Putin is trying to negotiate this trade of Donbass for Crimea.
How do you think, having this resolution adopted by Federal Council, would Putin want to seize all of Ukraine?
No, I don't think so. I would put it this way, that of course Putin doesn't need Ukraine in pieces. He needs Ukraine completely as an entirety. Yeah. But you don't need, and it's not possible, to conquer Ukraine militarily. It's way easier to install loyal people in Kiev, legitimately elected by constituents, to capitalize on social injustice, on economical problems, on things that are plaguing the country, to put his agents of influence into power. And that's what he is doing. He is using this military pressure on the East to promote his people in the West and in the center of the country.
And the very last question, as far as I know, you are currently a resident of Kiev, and also you are one of the key witnesses in the case of Viktor Yanukovych. How safe do you feel in Ukraine?
I feel that I am at war. It's a war zone right now. Ukraine is at war with my country, yes, with Russia, and I remember it all the time.
Who are you in war with?
I am at war with Mr. Putin and his corrupted crooks. which occupied my country, as well as they are trying to occupy your country.
Yes.
And I think that it's our common interest to change this, to overthrow them. And yes, we are at war, and war is dangerous. But it doesn't matter whether I am in Kiev, or I am in London, or I am in the United States, or I am elsewhere. As we see, my friends perished in Moscow, as in London, as in Washington, D.C., murdered by Putin's agents, by security officers of Russia Federation. So it really doesn't matter. And being in Kiev, I feel myself being at the forefront of the struggle, and it's a place where I'm the most efficient.
Do you feel somebody is spying on you here?
No, most likely I'm trying to take precaution as much as possible, and I'm very thankful for Ukrainian security forces who are also keeping an eye and are protecting me. At the moment when my friend Denis Voronenko was murdered, they even allocated security guards, bodyguards for me. And again, I am very thankful for them, although, you know, I think that if somebody would try to do bad things, no bodyguards would actually stop them.
Well, hopefully you're going to be safe here. Thank you so much for this interesting conversation.
Thank you very much.
That was Ilya Ponomaryov, former Russian Federation State Duma deputy. Thank you for watching Head to Head. I'm Oles Garjuk. Goodbye.